Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Donovan. This is the Unit 5, Day 3 homework. This can be found in the very last page. Please follow along with me. We're going to take a look at some 2-column parallel line proofs and angle proofs to help to prepare you for tomorrow's lesson. So remember, the first thing that we want to do is read our given and mark our model just with the information that we already know. So we know that line L is parallel to line M, and we know that angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. So we may want to start by writing down that information in step 1. That's our given information. Now remember that information is not given to you accidentally. So how might we use the fact that line L is parallel to line M? Well, it looks like we have this transversal that runs through this. We're trying to prove, so I'm just going to kind of highlight what we're trying to prove, that angle 4 is congruent to angle 3. So angle 4, this extra angle over here, that is on its own is congruent to angle 3, which is an angle that's in this parallel line model. Well, if I know L is parallel to M, I know that angle 2 and angle 3 are congruent. How do I know that? That's right. They're alternate interior angles. So I can say angle 2 is congruent to angle 3 because if I have parallel lines, then alternate interior angles are congruent. And if I know angle 2 and angle 3 are now congruent, and I knew angle 2 and angle 4 were congruent, then I know all 3 of these are congruent. So if I know all 3 of these are congruent, then I know that angle 4 is congruent to angle 3. Now, since we're dealing with congruence and not equality, this is the transitive property of equality. I'm sorry, of congruence. Transitive property of congruence. When we're dealing with equality, we use the substitution property. So this is the transitive property of congruence. Okay, let's take a look at one more. So again, I read my given and I mark my model. So it looks like G has already been marked parallel to N. I do also know that angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent. Now notice those two angles are not on a set of lines that we know are parallel, and they do not share a transversal. But what I want to prove in the end, and again I'm going to highlight, I'm not actually going to mark because I don't know this yet. I want to prove that line P is parallel to line R. So I need to think about how I prove that lines are parallel. Well, the way to prove that lines are parallel is by showing that a set of congruent angles form a special relationship, such as alternate interior angles or alternate exterior angles or corresponding angles being congruent, or same side interior angles being supplementary, or same side exterior angles being supplementary. So remember, I was given that line G and line N are parallel, and I have P and R are both lines that are transversals. Now I see that I have angle 1 and angle 2 congruent. Angle 1 and this other marked angle, angle 3, are also congruent. what type of angles are 1 and 3 with respect to the parallel lines G and N and transversal P? That's right, they're corresponding angles. So now I have an action plan. So I'm going to start by writing my given information that G is parallel to N and angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. That's given. Second, I'm going to take what I learned or what I could pull away from the fact that G is parallel to N. From G being parallel to N, I know that angle 1 and 3 on transversal P are congruent. So angle 1 congruent to angle 3. Remember we said those were corresponding angles, so we say if we have parallel lines, then corresponding angles are congruent. Now if I know angle 1 and 3 are congruent, well, and I knew 1 and 2 are congruent, then I know 3 and 2 are congruent. So I can say angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. This again is the transitive property of congruence. Very similar to the substitution property of equality. Now, angle 2 and angle 3 actually share a special relationship with lines P and R and the transversal N. What type of angles could we name angle 2 and angle 3 as? That's right, we could name them as alternate exterior angles, and they are congruent. If alternate exterior angles are congruent, then the lines must be parallel. So finally, we can write our proof statement that P is parallel to R. And our reason will be if alternate exterior angles are congruent, then they must be formed by parallel lines. And we're done. See you next time.